Welcome to Visions, a series of visits to almost everywhere. I'm your host and fellow traveler, Herb Malsman. We're in London, England. This episode takes place at New Scotland Yard. We begin our visit at the Black Museum with John Ross, who is...
And my only duty is that I have now to pass upon you the sentence.
I'm the curator of the Metropolitan Police Crime Museum, always known as the Black Museum. And it's the repository of all famous crimes that we've had in London over the years, going back 150, 200 years. We keep all the artifacts in here and all bits and pieces about the crime, and I'm the curator of the museum.
Okay, now, why is it called the Black Museum? Is it because of the criminal aspect, or is it, what's the historical significance?
Yeah, no, there's nothing like that. The museum has never been open to the public. It's more of a training area for police officers. And it has always, since it first opened, the museum opened in 1874, and it's only ever been open to police officers and civil staff attached to the police service. We do take other people outside who've got something to do with the resolvement of crime, criminologists, forensic scientists, judges, people like that, always have done. But the public have never been admitted. And back in 1880, there was a reporter on one of our newspapers, the Observer newspaper, tried many times to come into this museum, and he was refused admission all the time. As you can see, Herb, in here, the original museum in 1874 was in the bowels, in the basement at Scotland Yard, in a room where there were no lights. It was very, very dark and very, very dingy. As you can see now, we've replicated this in this modern day museum, and there are no windows in here. It's very, very dark to try and recapture the old atmosphere. And this guy in 1880 wrote an article in the Observer newspaper very disparagingly about the Metropolitan Police and about the museum, very upset that he had been refused admission 3 times. And he ended up this tirade against us with a statement, well, who wants to see this dirty little black museum in the bowels of the earth anyway? And from that, it picked up the Black Museum, and just people, perhaps it was the first time in 1880 they'd heard about this museum, and perhaps they thought that was the original title, but that's how it came.
Did he ever get in?
No, he never ever got in. No.
He gave you the title?
That's absolutely right, yes. Gave us the title, but it did him no good at all in the long run, no.
He made a very important move for you. He kind of moved you along and gave you an image for the museum, and unfortunately he passed on without ever seeing what he was talking about.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Okay.
In fact, the official title of the museum now, we call it the Metropolitan Police Crime Museum. A lot of people were upset with the connotations of black and crime, so we have actually changed the title to the actually Crime Museum now.
Right. Okay, so let's look at a general picture, and then we'll kind of get into specifics a little bit. We're looking out, and what are we looking at right now, John?
Well, as you come through the door in the museum, Scotland Yard is a 1960s building, big lump of horrible glass and concrete. The corridors are just bland, as you would have seen as you walk down her, bland concrete and glass. But as you're walking through the door, the idea was it's to transport you back into a different era, because as you walk through the door into the museum, off the modern corridor, you come into a very dark, dingy, old-fashioned room. And this room has been set out exactly as it was in 1874. Behind the wall, behind you there is a picture of the museum as it was sketched in 1883. So in 1981, when we redesigned this museum, it was thought to be a good idea to have the room trying to look like the museum was in 1874 when it first opened. So you walk in through the room, and it's very, very dark. There are no windows in the room. It's all artificial light. There is
a window, by the way, but...
There is a window, but it is a false window, because they did have a blocked off window in the old museum. So we've had a window, but that is just a frame. There is nothing behind it, and it doesn't give any light in, but it just looks as if it's a window.
It's sort of a make-believe light outside also.
Yeah, that's right, because it was in the basement, and there was at the bottom of a fire escape, and there was some sort of light, but there is nothing comes in there. And as you're walking through the door, you're immediately faced by a table. On the table there are bits of knives and swords and things.
Okay, let's look at those and discuss them.
Well, yeah, okay. The table right in front of you contained, initially at the front, is a samurai sword. This is one of the later additions to the museum. And this was the actual sword that chopped a detective sergeant's hand off in North London about 18 months ago.
It looks like it's still bloody.
Yes, everything is authentic. It don't get cleaned up in here. So yes, the sergeant's blood is still on the sword because that's exactly as I took it at the scene of the crime.
And that's about a foot beyond the handle. Would that be the handle?
Yeah,
or?
that's the scabbard for it, for the sword. Yes.
I mean, the blood itself is about a foot, about probably 8 or 9 inches, or maybe a foot above the point.
Yes.
As,
Yes, that's right. The sergeant got called to, in fact, all it was a matrimonial dispute. Husband and wife, they were divorced.
Those are the worst.
Well, this guy had been divorced a year, and he would never accept they were divorced. And when his wife started seeing somebody new, he threatened her. She went to the police. She knew she was in danger because she knew he had illegal guns, knives, and swords. The police officers went round the house with a warrant to go in and search for these illegal weapons. And the guy just attacked them, came running out of the kitchen with the samurai sword above his head and attacked the sergeant and did the sergeant all he could do. We're not armed in this country, of course, and all the sergeant could do is put his hand up to protect his face. And he just chopped his hand, and the whole hand came off complete, went straight through the bone, and the hand then lay on the floor.
Okay, a sneaker. We have a sneaker here.
Yeah, the sneaker, it goes together with the knife, as you can see next to it, Herb. And that, again, was another police officer stabbed, walked into a shop in South London whilst a robbery was taking place. Again, of course, we're not armed. All he can do is try and arrest the man physically. And as he tries to grapple with him to arrest him, the guy pulled out that knife, that long kitchen knife, I suppose, more like a butcher's knife, as you see there, about 12 to 15 inches long, pulled out and stabbed the policeman. The policeman, very, very seriously injured, nearly died. Because
There's no blood on this weapon.
there's no blood on this one. Okay. But the sneaker, when we eventually got to the assailant, there was obviously going to be a lot of blood on his clothing. He'd destroyed all the clothing, but he'd kept the shoes. And on the shoes, on the sneaker you see there are blood stains in 3 places. And that turned out to be the police officer's blood group and not the owner of the shoes blood group. And it was part of the evidence that convicted the man who stabbed the police officer.
Right. Okay, moving along, we can't possibly have the time to describe everything, but I do want to, let's look at this rope here.
The rope?
Or the case, whatever you choose.
Well, I think best, just to keep the description going of the room, Herb, as we walked in the door, right in front of us is this table, which is the table that was used in the museum in 1874, with little bits of modern stuff on it. Around the right-hand side of the room, there's an L-shaped black desk table that goes round 2 walls, and on it contains all weapons, going from knives, guns, firearms, harpoon guns, and all sorts of weapons, every single one which has been used on the streets of London. None of the weapons put here are just to show people what weapons look like. They're all put there because every one is an individual crime in London. Most of them are murders, serious assaults, robberies and things like that. But it's a sample of some of the things that we see on the streets of London.
Okay. I was told to ask about an umbrella.
Yes, I know there is. We have several umbrellas. Umbrellas have always been a favourite place of hiding weapons. We have here one where it is just a small, short, looks like an umbrella in a case, and anybody walking down the street with
like
it.
Like a Knerp or one of the small portable deals.
That's right.
A small
little hand one, yeah. And anyone walking down the street with it, no one would take any notice because it is just a guy carrying an umbrella. But inside, when you take it out, looks to be like one of our policemen's truncheons inside, but in fact it's not even a truncheon, it is a shotgun. When you find the firing pin and you fire it, and the whole thing breaks into 2 and the shotgun cartridge goes in the middle, and in fact it is a shotgun. But put inside the umbrella case...
It's a sort of shotgun.
Yeah, it's a very, very short shotgun, but it works, it fires, it will kill. But the problem is, it will allow somebody to get close to somebody because you don't see it coming. You think you're looking at an umbrella, but in fact you're looking at a gun.
Now, I guess in England, again, being stereotypical about your country, it rains all the time, and it's rainy and foggy, and so I guess umbrellas are...
That's right, umbrellas are seen every day. Even in the height of summer, you can never be sure you're not going to get a shower of rain in London. So, yes, umbrellas are seen every day. It would mean to see somebody walking with an umbrella, even if the sun is shining, is not unusual.
Right. Okay, there are so many weapons here, and I'm so surprised to see as many weapons as I do, firearms. But what are some of the famous, what are some of the points of interest on this table over here? Then I want to take a look at what looks like a glove like Freddy Krueger's, and some busts. I guess would these be death masks or death busts?
Yes, above, on talking about the glove you see there.
Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, Freddy Krueger, and that's exactly what it was. The young lad watched the film Nightmare on Elm Street, saw Freddy Krueger with the hands, and he thought, what a good idea. So he went out and bought a glove, and onto the end of the fingers of the glove, he taped surgeon's scalpel blades. So on each finger.
Two to a finger.
Two to a finger, one either side, and then taped it on. So you have this glove with these two very, very sharp blades sticking out the end. And he went out and attacked somebody with it. And on there, as you can see, there is blood. Now, we put that out on one of our TV programs, a police TV program, asking for the person who had been attacked to come forward, but no one ever did. So we could never charge the man with assault. It could only be with just holding an offensive weapon.
So where is he now? I mean, he's just gone on his way?
Well, he got fined.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say how much, but it doesn't matter.
It's immaterial. He just got fined for it because we could never prove that he had actually assaulted somebody, although there is blood on there. But people get affected by the television. They get affected by movies that they see. Probably you and I would take no notice. You just take it because if it's just the movie. But a lot of people get affected and they copy it and they think it's good and they go out and copy it. Certain types of people will copy what they see on films.
Sure. Okay, we have a number of fountain pens here. What about these fountain pens?
Well, the fountain pens are exactly the same.
And ballpoints as well.
Yeah. Pens have always been a favourite place of hiding weapons. Now, that is an ordinary fountain pen. But when you take the cap off, you see that the guy has cut the pen in half, put a piece of wood into the pen itself, and then stuck a blade inside. And then when you put the cap back on, of course, it's completely hidden. Now, if somebody stands in front of you with a pen, you don't think much about it. Right. But that cap could be off and stuck, and that knife now stuck into you. And that, in fact, how old is it? That's 5 inches long.
Right.
That was a murder weapon. That was used to slash the jugular vein on the throat, and the man died. So it's a murder weapon. But because you think you're looking at a pen, it will allow you to get close to somebody before they realise what's happening. So all these pens have always been a favourite place of finding.
The thing is, in England, firearms, and we're going to get into it later on, but firearms are becoming more and more an everyday equipment, or everyday equipment here in England for the police. I know that a month or so ago, and we're taping here on June 3rd, 1994, for the first time ever in England, a police officer was wounded by a semi-automatic or an automatic, well, in this case, a submachine gun.
Yeah.
So now many of the barbies, or some of the barbies, are being outfitted now with firearms. So firearms are coming to England, and I'm from New York City, so I know firearms. I mean, I've seen them, and they're in every school and almost many lunch pails and that sort of thing. But again, I've never been out of America before, but always reading about England and picking up English newspapers from time to time. The crimes themselves were rather bizarre, in lieu of the fact that it was harder to get firearms. There were more creative ways to do away with your neighbor.
Yeah, well, that's true. Unfortunately, you're absolutely right. The firearms are becoming part of the culture over here now.
You can thank us.
Well, no, I don't think.
In a way.
I suppose in a way. I think no, I don't really think we can thank you. I think our biggest problem is the problem for everybody in the world is the big explosion in drugs, and that is the problem. When you're getting people dealing with drugs, you're talking about a multi-billion dollar industry, and you will make sure, no matter whatever, you will make sure your drugs get through and you make money. And if that means taking guns and just shooting anybody, whether it be a policeman or just an ordinary member of the public, you will do it if it comes in your way of pushing your drugs and making a lot of money. And of course now our problem is with the big drug explosion. It comes at the same time with the fall of communism in the Eastern Bloc, and all the guns and firearms that were in Eastern Bloc countries are now being pushed into the West. They're being sold by those people to make a few bucks, and to make enough money to live, to eat, to get their food. And they're being sold. And we are now seeing all these weapons pouring into this country, having been sold. And they can be picked up by people and brought in. And that, of course, corresponds with exactly the same time as we are becoming part of the United States of Europe. And we are going into the European community where trade barriers go down and customs do not check people. And so we're getting these weapons just pouring into the country at the same time as we've got the drugs explosion. And it's gone berserk.
Freedom is a very costly item.
Yes, it is. It is always, since it first opened, the museum opened in 1874, and it's only ever been open to police officers and civil staff attached to the police service. We do take other people outside who've got something to do with the resolvement of crime, criminologists, forensic scientists, judges, people like that, always have done.
Pass upon you the sentence.
I'm the curator of the Metropolitan Police Crime Museum, always known as the Black Museum, and it's the repository of all famous crimes that we've had in London over the years, going back 150, 200 years. But the public have never been admitted, and back in 1880 there was a reporter on one of our newspapers, the Observer newspaper, tried many times to come into this museum, and he was refused admission all the time. As you can see, Herb, in here, the original museum in 1874 was in the bowels, in the basement of Scotland Yard, in a room.
Welcome to Visions, a series of visits to almost everywhere. I'm your host and fellow traveler, Herb Malsman. We're in London, England. This episode takes place at New Scotland Yard. We begin our visit at the Black Museum with John Ross, who is...
My duty, and my only duty, is that I have now to...
We keep all the artifacts in here and all bits and pieces about the crime, and I'm the curator of the museum.
Okay, now why is it called the Black Museum? Is it because of the criminal aspect, or is it, what's the historical significance?
Yeah, no, there's nothing like that. The museum has never been open to the public. It's more of a training area for police officers. And